On April 26, 1986, reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded, not like a bomb, but violently enough to tear the building apart and poison an entire region. This wasn't a freak accident, it wasn't sabotage. It was a perfect storm of reactor design, human decisions, and physics doing exactly what physics always does when ignored. To understand what happened, we first need to understand how the reactor itself worked. The reactor at Chernobyl was an RBMK-1000, a Soviet-designed nuclear reactor. RBMK stands for Reactor Bolshoi Moshchnosti Kanalny, high-power channel-type reactor. At its core, nuclear power comes from fission, splitting uranium atoms, releasing heat, which boils water, which spins turbines, which makes electricity. So far, normal. Here's where the RBMK differs. An RBMK reactor uses uranium fuel rods to produce heat, graphite as a neutron moderator, slows neutrons to sustain the chain reaction, and water as a coolant. Most reactors use water for both moderation and cooling. RBMK reactors split those jobs. Graphite moderates, water cools. That separation is the key problem. When water in the RBMK boils and turns into steam, it stops absorbing neutrons. But the graphite keeps moderating them. This creates a dangerous property called a positive void coefficient. In simple terms, when cooling water turns into steam bubbles, the reactor becomes more reactive, not less. In other words, overheating causes more power, which causes more overheating. That's backwards. Control rods were supposed to fix this, but RBMK control rods had graphite tips. When inserted, they briefly increased reactivity before reducing it. Under normal conditions, this was manageable. Under unstable conditions, it was catastrophic. On the night of April 25th, operators were running a safety test. The test asked, if the plant loses power, can the spinning turbines generate electricity long enough to keep cooling pumps running? To perform the test, they did the following. Lowered reactor power far below safe levels. Disabled multiple automatic safety systems. Left the reactor in an unstable configuration for hours. At low power, RBMK reactors build up Xenon 135, a neutron-absorbing poison. The reactor stalled. To compensate, operators withdrew too many control rods, violating safety limits. At 1:23 a.m., they began the test. Cooling flow dropped, steam voids formed, reactivity surged. The operators pressed the emergency shutdown button, AZ5. Instead of stopping the reaction, the graphite-tipped rods caused a brief, massive spike in power. In less than a second, reactor output jumped to hundreds of times its design limit. Fuel channels ruptured, water flashed to steam. 2 explosions followed. The reactor core was destroyed. The graphite ignited. Radioactive material was launched into the atmosphere. The reactor was gone. All right, now let's translate all that into plain English. Imagine a nuclear reactor as a campfire. Fuel is the wood. Control rods are the damper. Cooling water is someone pouring water nearby to keep things under control. Most reactors are designed so that if things get too hot, the fire naturally calms down. Chernobyl's reactor was designed so that if things got too hot, the fire burned hotter. That's problem number 1. Problem number 2, the fire extinguisher, the emergency shutdown, didn't immediately put out the fire. For a split second, it threw gasoline on it. The operators didn't fully understand this behavior. They were following procedures that assumed the reactor would behave safely. It didn't. When they tried to shut it down, physics said no, and physics always wins. Chernobyl wasn't just a disaster of technology. It was a disaster of design assumptions, information silos, and unchecked confidence. The reactor didn't explode because it was evil or cursed. It exploded because it did exactly what it was built to do, under the wrong conditions. And that's the real lesson of Chernobyl. Nature doesn't care what you intended. It only cares what you built. So what topic should I cover next? Comment your suggestions down below, and until next time, this has been Dr. Marcus Zane, former head of research for the NHA.